All right, we welcome you into the Hometown Sports Huddle on this Wednesday. I'm Dave Wall, sports director here at WDBJ7, and good show today. I know some of you were hoping to hear from Matt Hagan, the funny car driver from Christiansburg. We had a little mix-up in our schedules. Matt is going to join us next week on the show, so apologize for saying he would be here today. I know a lot of you were looking forward to that. However, Matt is going to join us in studio next week, so I hope we will let you know. Of course, we will remind you, but I hope many of you can join us for that one. Again, Matt Hagan joining us next week here on the Sports Huddle. But in the meantime, got a lot to talk about as, it's been a pretty busy day in the world of sports. Let's recap some of the things that maybe we talked about yesterday. The first one is we were talking about Bree Warren. Bree Warren was the Virginia Tech softball player who had been fighting her way, hopefully to get onto the field for Virginia Tech. However, unable to do so as a Montgomery County court judge denied her temporary injunction today. And like we mentioned yesterday, a lot of it was kind of what we thought might happen because Bree Warren's, in getting a temporary injunction, she's trying to play, as we look at video of her from earlier in her career, she's trying to play. However, she this is only a temporary injunction. They're still going to have to hear the rest of the case with the NCAA. And in doing so, well, the NCAA, what happens if they come back on, April 30th when the next court hearing is, or in May, and say, oh, wait, we shouldn't have granted that injunction. Your ruling's denied. You can't take back then the games that she's played in, and that could also possibly lead to forfeits for Virginia Tech. So certainly it's the judge erring on the side of caution. I know she has to be incredibly disappointed. However, in the long term for both Virginia Tech and for her, probably the best case scenario. So that way, we can get this ironed out, and hopefully she can play in the last month of the season, hopefully into the postseason as well. As Warren, again, her claim that was, she was transferring from South Carolina. She got some bad academic advice at South Carolina saying, oh, wait, you're not actually eligible to play just yet, and you're not eligible to transfer, I should say, just yet. And so she ended up sitting out a season after a coaching change there when the NCAA said, well, actually, you should have transferred, but the player being held responsible, saying she ran out of her eligibility while there. So her next court hearing comes up on April the 30th, and we will continue to follow that story. All right, elsewhere, the Roanoke Rail Yard Dogs, they are going to be back at the Berglund Center on Friday night. Best of 5 series now against Evansville. Now, earlier today, I talked to Dogs players and also to Coach Dan Fremder and talked a lot about this matchup. We're going to play some of the interview for you here in just a moment, but talked with him about this interview, and basically a lot of the things he had to say, was, yes, we haven't seen Evansville this year, but as we get the interview loaded up here, he hasn't seen Evansville. They haven't played each other since last season, which is certainly unusual, when you get into a postseason situation. However, Evansville is a team that they know a lot about, that you can watch games online, you can scout. And the one thing I asked him that you'll hear in the middle of this about 5-minute clip we're going to hear, this is the raw interview. I haven't had a chance to really edit it down yet for you. But, in asking him, say, hey, you guys, scored 13 goals in your first series against Birmingham. How much of that do you take into the next series? And he's like, I hope our guys, kind of throw that away. This is a different team, a more physical team. But he says they do have a plan for Evansville in this series. Let's hear from Coach Dan Bremner.
Their playoff series against Pensy. The same way we would prepare for any team early in the year where you haven't seen them over the summer. And generally speaking, it's not carrying over from one year to the next. So we are re-scouting teams that the next year. Is this good with the beeping?
So what's your scouting report?
On them is they're big, they're strong. They have as far as actual size on paper, they have 3 guys that are 6'4", 6'5". Big bodies, 220. So the idea is that we're gonna have to skate. We have to get them up and down the ice as much as possible because those big bodies will tire quicker than ours. But we're not going to shy away from it either. It's a game plan that we went into against Birmingham, that we wanted to be heavy. We wanted to play heavy in front of our net, in front of their net, and we'll be looking for more of the same. Obviously, the strategy changes a little bit if they're bigger, to move around them a little bit more. But we want that hard-nosed hockey all the time.
Does it help that you haven't played them this year, so that way there's really no scouting report, I guess, from an on-ice perspective? I guess you say the same for them as well.
Does it help?
Yeah.
I don't know if it helps. The one way it might is a little bit of excitement of playing a new team. You know, when you get in the meat of the season and we're playing Fayetteville and then Knoxville and then Fayetteville and Knoxville and Fayetteville and Knoxville, it's always nice when we get a weekend where we're playing another opponent. So exciting to play a team that we're not used to for sure. As far as helping, other than that, you know, we'll scout, and at the end of the day, we're still trying to stay with our identity and we're trying to play our hockey, and it'll be who can kind of impose their will on the other.
How proud of you of this team so far to kind of be able to do what they've been doing? I mean, we saw a bunch of scoring last time and things that they've been able to do this whole season. But how proud are you just to see this team kind of just be so resilient over the rest of the season?
Yeah, in a lot of ways. You know, we lost, I think it was 5 or 6 of all our top 5 scorers. You know, we had a leadership shift, of course, and the leaders stepped up in a big way. And even with Dorsey missing a ton of time with injury, and Matty O'Day missing a bunch of time as well, and then Val getting called up. So like that was even pulled apart. But you know, they did a great job when it mattered, and building that culture back up. And then yeah, as far as the play goes, like, you know, when you lose, any team loses that much of your top end, top side of your team, it's hard to think that you're going to have as much success or more success that we've seen this year. So proud of the way they've not just performed, but the way they've also grew the culture and brought other guys up with them.
Game 2 was so impressive because they not only Birmingham didn't get a lot of shots off, but it looks like they just had trouble entering past the blue line. You guys were really able to do a lot of checks and take the puck away. I mean, that seemed to be a real focus in Game 2.
Yeah, they you know, give credit to our guys for sure. That being said, you know, we went in with a game plan that you know, first 5 we were going to kind of try to impose our will early on them, and they kind of folded, honestly, and I want our guys to be pumped about that. I want them to feel good about that. It was a great performance. We won't see the same going forward here. So we got to make sure that we're prepared for 60-minute plus battles. And you know, Evansville's already been tested in that with an overtime game in Game 3 of their series. So you know, they're battle tested, and going through last year with winning a championship, it's going to be a totally different beast.
How big is it, Dan, to start the playoffs first 2 games at home? And I'm sure you want to capitalize on that as much as you can.
Yeah, of course. Just home, being at your home rink, the whole game day routine is always a little bit more comfortable at home. Our home fans, of course, this place I'm sure will be rocking throughout the weekend. But you know, on the road or at home, those first couple games are so important. You don't want to get behind the 8 ball. Obviously, in a 3-game series, it can really put you in a bad spot. In a 5-game, you got to go in with the same mentality. You know, going back to our 5-game series in the finals a few years ago, all in on that game 1, and it can kind of set the tone and carry the series.
Where do you feel like you guys don't necessarily need to pay too much attention to detail in terms of just, you guys are kind of buzzing right now? Is it the offense? Is it the defense? Everything was kind of clicking. So which one kind of balances out?
I wish there was somewhere. I don't think there's anywhere that we really feel, you know, we're comfortable in one hand, where, you know, we have a lot of guys that we're getting secondary scoring. We got depth scoring, which is awesome. But you know, the biggest thing at this level over the years is consistency. And one night it might be our top line rolling along, and the next night with that depth, it helps that you have a secondary scoring. But really, we got to focus on. We're continuing to focus on the defensive side of the puck, and making sure that we're keeping you know, the job easier for Rhodey back there. And then when we have these guys stepping up scoring, it makes the game much easier.
All right, that's Coach Dan Bremner of the Roanoke Rail Yard Dogs speaking with us today ahead of their Friday night semifinal opener. And I loved what he said about, you know, throw that series out the window against Birmingham, because really it's not going to do you any good. This is a totally different team. They play a more physical style of hockey. They're able to beat you down, grind you on the boards. Roanoke can match them. In fact, Bremner and the players, which we'll be hearing more from as we get closer to the game on Friday night, said, you know, that's one of the things we're emphasizing. We know we have to really throw ourselves at them and make them burn up a lot of their energy. He said Evansville is a little bit bigger in size. You know, they've got these bigger bodies that they know that if, you know, yes, they've been tested in overtime and double overtime games, but they haven't faced the kind of high octane pressure that Roanoke plans to throw at them on Friday night. And certainly when you've got a veteran goaltender like Austin Rodebush in net for Roanoke, you've got something solid in net, and with the defense, if they can keep that defensive pressure up that they were able to execute execute in the first series. I think good things are ahead for the Rail Yard Dogs. So again, a 5-game series, games 1 and 2 Friday and Saturday night, and then the action shifts to Evansville for games 3 and 4. Game 5, if necessary, would be back at the Berglund Center with a spot in the SPHL Finals on the line. All right, as we're looking ahead to tonight, well, we got 2 things to talk about. First of all, for those of you just tuning in, expecting to see Matt Hagan, I mentioned it in the beginning, the drag racer who, in fact, it gives me another excuse to show his tremendous win. Matt Hagan, right here. This was in Sonoma, California on Sunday. He's on the bottom of your screen, and don't blink.
And this one's going down to the wire. Finish line, it's going to be Matt Hagan. What a win, what a weekend for Tony Stewart and team. 387.6, 330 miles an hour. Hagan beats the 389 of Ron Capps. This guy can't do anything but win around here.
Funny car race, I should say.
Matt Hagan has to crack that head in just right. He gets his first victory of the season in the 1,000th funny car race against Ron Capps, a guy you have a ton of respect for. Not only was it a win for you, but a win for...
Get a little bit closer. All right, 2 more things we're going to look at before we wrap up tonight's show. And Austin and Mitch will be taking it on Thursday and Friday. But I did want to talk about, first of all, we have Major League Baseball coming back to the Big 7 this upcoming Friday, the 17th. The Washington Nationals are going to be playing the San Francisco Giants. First pitch is at 6:30. And we do have a slate of 10 Washington Nationals games that will air on WDBJ7. If you want to see which games we're going to have, we have a listing for you. They're on our website right now, WDBJ7.com. But the Nats and the Giants not necessarily off to the year I think they thought they might get, so good opportunity for the Nats to pick up some wins this upcoming weekend. But I know a lot of people in this region are Nationals fans, so that'll be a good one as well. Also, we are talking hockey, and of course we just mentioned the Rail Yard Dogs, but tonight it's also game 1 for the Blue Ridge Bobcats. Hitachi Energy Center going to be lit up like this with playoff hockey. Second time in their 3-year history. The Bobcats are going to be facing Port Huron tonight. And Blue Ridge has a great offense. In fact, 222 points in the regular season as far as goals scored, I should say. And very physical brand of hockey as well. Josh Britt's one of our photojournalists, is a big-time hockey fan and a big-time Bobcats fan. He is going to be on the ice tonight shooting the game for us, so we will have highlights of this tonight at 11 o'clock. But, it's a semifinal series, 3 games in the Federal Prospect League. You win that one, and you go on to the finals. So certainly plenty of opportunity for this Blue Ridge team to make a big impression. Hockey has really been booming in Wytheville since the advent of the Bobcats, as we've seen attendance figures going up each game for them. Opposition goal there, but Blue Ridge won that game, so we don't have to worry about that. But again, we will be having highlights of that one coming up tonight at 11 o'clock. All right, now don't forget, spring games this weekend. Virginia Tech, Liberty, they're both in action. I will be at Virginia Tech at Lane Stadium for that one, as well as with Austin Hicks. Mitch Carr will be floating around as well. So we're going to have you covered in Blacksburg. Hopefully we'll have some coverage from Lynchburg as well. But I know I will be looking forward to seeing the early looks at a James Franklin offense and defense on the field at Virginia Tech. That should be exciting. All right. I think that's going to do it tonight for the Hometown Sports Huddle. Again, Matt Hagan will join us next week here on the Huddle. But until then, I'm Dave Walls. Thanks again for watching, everybody. So long, and have a great night. Take care. Bye.